Hello, we are reading The Eagle by Rosemary Sutcliff. This is my second time reading this chapter because the first time got deleted. So, here we go. Y'all let me know in the comments if you prefer it to be a horizontal view or a vertical view. The first time I recorded this chapter, it was horizontal, because that's what worked better at that point, but let me know. Anyway, we are in chapter 20, Valedictory. We left off where Marcus and Eska had just made it to the wall. He had made it to the cohort commander, who used to be second in command, Drusillus, and presented him the eagle, and then proceeded to faint because he was so exhausted and his leg probably also buckled. So now we're skipping forward to the next scene. Toward evening, sorry, let me get a good breath. Hang on. Excuse me. Toward evening of a day in late October, Marcus and Eska came riding up the last lift of the Khaliva road. Having learned of Iberacum that the legate Claudius was not yet returned, they had pushed on south, knowing that they could not miss him by the way, to wait for him at Khaliva. Legate Claudius was the one, Uncle Aquila's friend, that sent him on this wild goose chase in the first place. So they learned he was not at the one place, so he must be, he's going to be at Khaliva, which is his home, his town, the town where Uncle Aquila lives. So they're pushing on to there. They were rid of their beards and reasonably clean once more, and Marcus had had his hair clipped short again in the Roman manner, but still clad, or still wearing, in the tattered Emilian clothes, so all the brightly colored and crazy clothes of their adventuring, still gaunt and hollow-eyed and disreputable. They had more than once needed that permit provided by Drusillus to save them from the awkward charge of having stolen the army post horses on which they rode. They were tired, bone-tired, and without any glow of triumph to warm the leaden chill of their tiredness. That's a metaphor. And they rode with the reins loose on their horses' necks, in silence, save for the strike of shod hooves on the metalled road and the squeak of wet leather. But after many months in the wild aloofness of the north, this gentler and more friendly countryside seemed to Marcus to hold out its arms to him. And it was with a sense of homecoming that he lifted his face to the soft gray mizzle, and saw afar off beyond the rolling miles of dappled forest the familiar and suddenly beloved outline of the South Downs, the area that his uncle lives. So he looks above the, kind of fog, rainy fog, and sees, suddenly he's like, oh, suddenly it's kind of beloved, like, oh. They rode into Khaliva by the north gate, left the horses at the Golden Vine, probably an inn, for return to the transit camp next day, and set out on foot for the house of Aquila. In the narrow street, when they turned into it, the poplar trees were already bare, and the way slippery with shriveled, wet leaves. It is autumn. The daylight was fading fast, and the windows of Uncle Aquila's watchtower were full of lemon-pale lamplight that seemed somehow like a welcome. The door was on the latch, and they pushed it open and went in. There was an air of almost unwanted bustle in the house, like chaotic, just crazy, as though someone had lately arrived or was expected to arrive at any moment. As they emerged from the narrow entrance closet, old Stephanos was crossing the atrium toward the dining recess. He cast one glance at them, uttered a startled bleat, and all but dropped the lamp he was carrying. "It is all right, Stephanos," Marcus told him, slipping off his wet cloak and tossing it over a convenient bench. "It is only the Golden Vine that we are sprung from, not the realms of Hades." So we're not ghosts. We are, in fact, just from the north of, Britain. "Is my uncle in his study?" The old slave's mouth was open to reply, but nobody ever heard what he said, for his voice was drowned by a frenzied baying, or like a dog going, "Ah!" that rose on the instant. There was a wild scurry of paws across the colonnade, and a great brindled shape sprang over the threshold and came streaking across the floor, skidding on the smooth surface, ears pricked and bush-tail flying. Cub, lying dejectedly on the colonnade, had heard Marcus's voice and come to find him. "Cub!" Marcus called, and sat down hurriedly on top of his cloak, just in time to save himself from being bowled over like a stoned hare as Cub landed with a flying leap on his chest. They slid together off the bench with a resounding thump. Marcus had his arms round the young wolf's neck, and Cub thrust against him, whining and yelping, licking his face from ear to ear with frantic joy. But by now, news of their return had burst through the house, and Marsupor came scuttling with dignified haste to one door, while Sassika ran in through another, still clutching a lard iron spoon. And somehow, between Cub's joyful onslaughts, Marcus was turning from one to the other, greeting and being greeted. "You have not got rid of us, you see, Marsupor. Sassika, it is like flowers in spring to see you. The nights I have dreamed of your honey cakes. And I thought I heard your voice, Marcus, among others." There was a sudden hush, and Uncle Aquila was standing at the foot of the watchtower stairs, with old gray-muzzled Procyon, his old dog, at his side, and behind him, the dark, austere figure of Claudius Hieronymius. Marcus got up slowly, one hand still on the great savage head that was pressed against his thigh. "It seems that we have timed our arrival well," he said. He started forward at the same instant as his uncle strode to meet him, and next moment they had come together in the middle of the atrium, and Marcus was gripping both the older man's hands in his. "Uncle Aquila, oh, it is good to see you again. How goes it with you, sir?" "Strangely enough, it goes the better for seeing you safely home once more, even in the guise of a Tiber rat." He's pretending that he's, wearing a costume dressed like a rat, even though he's clearly not. He's just gaunt and looks disheveled. Uncle Aquila said. His glance went to Eska and back again, in the guise of 2 Tiber rats. And then, after an instant's pause, very quietly, "What news?" "I have brought it back," Marcus said, equally quietly. And that was all, for the moment, on the subject of the lost eagle. The 4 of them were alone in the atrium, the slaves having slipped out to their own duties when the master of the house appeared, and Uncle Aquila gathered both young men after him with an imperious gesture to where the legate, who had drawn aside from their meeting, was quietly warming himself at the brazier. In the general shifting, Cub circled for an instant to thrust his muzzle into Eska's hand in greeting, then returned to Marcus again. Procyon greeted nobody. He was a one-man dog, to the point of seldom appearing conscious that other men existed. "He has done it," Uncle Aquila was announcing in a kind of triumphant grumble. "He has done it, by Jupiter! You never thought he would, did you, my Claudius?" "I am not sure," said the legate, his strange black eyes resting on Marcus consideringly. "No, I am not at all sure, my Aquila." Marcus saluted him, then drew Eska forward from the outskirts of the group. "Sir, may I bring to your remembrance my friend Eska Mac Cunaval?" "I remember him very well," said Claudius with a quick smile to the Briton. Eska bent his head to him. "You witnessed my manumission papers, I believe, sir," he said in a dead-level tone that made Marcus glance at him anxiously, realizing suddenly that there had been no real homecoming for Eska in this return to a house in which he had been a slave. "I did, but I generally remember men by other things than the papers I may have witnessed for them," the legate said gently. An exclamation from Uncle Aquila cut across the little exchange, and looking around, Marcus found the other staring at his left hand, which he had unconsciously curved about the precious bundle which he still carried in its sling. "That ring!" said Uncle Aquila. "Show it to me." Marcus slipped off the heavy signet ring and passed it to him. "Of course you recognize it?" His uncle stood for a few moments examining it, his face unreadable. Then he gave it back. "Yes," he said. "Yes, by Jupiter, I do recognize it. How came you by your father's ring?" But with Sassika's voice rising near at hand, and one or other of the slaves likely at any moment to come through the atrium about their preparations for dinner, Marcus could not bring himself to start on that story. Slipping the ring back onto his finger, he said, "Uncle Aquila, could we leave that with all the rest for a fitter place and season? It is a long story, and there are many doors to this room. I don't want people eavesdropping." Their eyes met, and after a pause, Uncle Aquila said, "Aye, well, both matters have waited long enough for an hour to make a little difference. You agree, Claudius?" The Egyptian nodded. "Most assuredly, I agree. In your watchtower, after we have eaten, we shall be safe from interruption." Then Marcus shall make his full report." Suddenly his face crinkled into a thousand-creased smile, and with a swift change of manner that seemed to draw a silken curtain over the whole affair of the lost eagle, shutting it decently from view until the time came to take it out again and deal with it, he turned to Marcus. "It seemed always that I visit this house at a happy hour. The last time it was Cub who came back, and this time it is you. But the reunion remains the same." Like happy. Marcus looked down at Cub, who was leaning against him, head up and eyes half closed in ecstasy. "We are glad to be together, Cub and I," he said. "So it seems. It is almost past believing that a wolf should be so much a friend. Was he greatly more difficult than a hound in the making? Like, was he a lot harder to raise than a normal dog would be?" "I think he was more stubborn, certainly fiercer to handle. But it was Eska rather than I who had the making of him, like training him. He is the expert." "Ah, of course." The Legate turned to Eska. "You come of the Brigantes, do you not? More than once I have seen Cub's brethren running among the dog packs of your tribe, and wondered how—" But Marcus heard no more. He had stooped quickly and was running an exploring hand over the young wolf, suddenly aware of something that he had not really taken in the first flush of homecoming. "Uncle Aquila, what have you done to Cub? He is nothing but skin and bone." "We have done nothing to Cub," said Uncle Aquila in accents of acute disgust. "Cub has been breaking his own willful heart in his own amusement. For his own amusement. Since you left, he has refused food from any but that chit Katia, and since her going, he has preferred to starve. That brute has been deliberately dying in our midst, with the entire household buzzing round him like blowflies around a stranded fish." Marcus's caressing hand, so he can tell he's like frustrated. This dog will not eat from anyone. He'd rather starve. Marcus's caressing hand had checked on Cub's neck, and something seemed to twist and turn cold inside him. So he'd been petting him, and then he stopped. "Katia," he said. "Where has Katia gone?" He had scarcely thought of her save twice in all the months that he'd been away, but it seemed a long, long time before his uncle answered. So he's been so crazy busy with the adventure that he hasn't hardly thought of her when he was out there. But now that he's back and learned that she's gone, it seemed a long, long time before his uncle answered. Suddenly, he's very interested in this. "Only to acquire Sulis for the winter. Her Aunt Valaria discovered a need to take the waters and shifted the whole household a few days ago. If you're at all familiar, Great Britain has a town, England has a town called Bath. It's been famous for quite a long time, obviously all the way back to here. It's the same town. Like, I enjoy reading Jane Austen, and a lot of times the characters in her book, they believe that there were like healing properties in the waters, which runs all the way back to here, because they're naturally warm springs, like aquifers, and people have been going there for forever. It's even now like a common place to go. People don't really believe it has healing properties anymore, but at least for the most part. Okay, so and Valar, they went there. Marcus let go of the breath that he had been holding. He's like, gosh, where'd they go? Did they leave forever? But then he released his breath. He began to play with Cub's ears, drawing them again and again through his fingers. "Did she leave any word for me?" "She came to me in a fine flaming passion," of course she did, "the day before she was swept away, to bring back your bracelet." "Did you tell her about keeping it?" "I did not. Some things are best unsaid until the need comes for saying them." Remember, Marcus had asked Uncle Quilla to tell Katia that if Marcus didn't return, that he died, that she would keep it. So did you tell her about it? And he goes, some things are best left unsaid until you need to bring them up, and that was one thing. Unless Marcus actually died. "I told her that since you had left it in her charge, it seemed to me best that she keep it until she came back in the spring," so she's come back, "and could give it into your hands." So he just missed her by a couple days, and now I won't see her till spring. It's October. "I also promised to tell you that she would guard it well through the winter." He held one great blue-veined hand to the warmth of the brazier and smiled at it. "She is a vixen, the little one, but a faithful vixen." "Yes," said Marcus. "Yes. Sir, with your leave, I will take Cub and feed him now." Thank goodness, the poor thing's starving. Eska, who had been answering the Legate's questions about the taming of wolf cubs, said quickly, I will take him. Maybe if we both take him, we can wash off some of the journey while we are about it. We have time for that, Uncle Aquila? Time and to spare, said his uncle. Dinner will doubtless be put back to Jupiter knows how what hour, while Saskia ransacks her store shelves for your benefit while she tries to come up with a really nice meal for their homecoming. Uncle Aquila was perfectly right. For Marcus's benefit, Saskia ransacked her store shelves with joyful abandon. The sad thing was that it was all as good as wasted. To Marcus, at all events, this dinner was completely unreal. He was so tired that the soft light of the palm oil lamps seemed a golden fog, and he tasted nothing of what he ate, so sad, and scarcely even noticed the handful of rain-wet autumn crocuses which Saskia, proud of her knowledge of Roman ways, had scattered on the table. It seemed odd, after so many meals eaten in the open or squatting beside peat fires, to eat at a civilized table again, to see the clean-shaven faces of the other men, and the tunics of soft white wool that they wore. Esques borrowed one of his own to hear the quiet, clipped voices of his uncle and the legate when they spoke to each other. Very odd, like something out of another world, a familiar world grown suddenly unfamiliar. He had almost forgotten what to do with a napkin. Only Eska, clearly finding it strange and uncomfortable to eat while reclining on his left elbow seemed real in the queer, brittle unreality. It was an uneasy meal, eaten without lingering and almost in silence, for the minds of all four were on one subject, the eagle, carefully shut away behind its silken curtain, the metaphor of, but making it hopeless to try to talk of something else. A strange homecoming meal, with the shadow of the lost eagle brooding over it. And Marcus was thankful when at last Uncle Aquila set down the cup after pouring the final oblation and said, "Shall I go up to my study now?" Following the two older men and once again carrying the eagle, Marcus had mounted 4 or 5 of the watchtower steps before he realized that Eska was not coming up behind. And looking back, he saw him still standing at the foot of the stairs. "I think that I will not come," Eska said. "Not come? But you must come." Eska shook his head. "It is between you and your uncle and the legate." Followed as ever by Cub, Marcus came back down the few steps again. "It is between the 4 of us. What maggot has gotten inside your head, Eska?" "I think that I should not go to your uncle's private sanctum," Eska said stubbornly. "I have been a slave in his house." "You are not a slave now." "No, I am your freedman now. It is strange. I never thought of that until this evening." Marcus had never thought of it either, but he knew it was true. You could give a slave his freedom, but nothing could undo the fact that he had been a slave. And between him, a freedman, and any freeman who had never been unfree, there would still be a difference. So Eska, even though he's now freed, he will always carry his history of having been a slave. So he has the status of being a freedman. He once was a slave and now he's not. But that distinction will go with him for the rest of his life. So he will never really quite be equal with someone who's never been a slave before. Even though they're both freed, it is different. And he's really feeling that distinction right now while about to go up and talk to really 2 high commanding officers, his uncle and the legate, and of course Marcus. Wherever the Roman way of life held good, that difference would be there. That was why it had not mattered all these months that they had been away. That was why it mattered now. Suddenly he felt baffled and helpless. "You did not feel like this before we went north. How has it altered now?" "That was at the beginning. I had not had time to understand. I knew only that I was free. A hound slipped from the leash, and we were going away from it all in the morning. Now we have come back." Yes, they had come back, and the thing had got to be faced, and faced at once. On a sudden impulse, Marcus reached out his free hand and caught his friend's shoulder, not at all gently. "Listen to me," he said. "Are you going to live all the rest of your life as though you had taken a whipping and could not forget it? Because if you are, I am sorry for you. You don't like being a freedman, do you? Well, I don't like being lame. That makes 2 of us. And the only thing we can do about it, you and I, is to learn to carry our scars lightly." He gave the shoulder a friendly shake and dropped his hand. "Come up with me now, Eska." Eska did not answer for a moment. And then, slowly, his head went up, and his eyes wore the dancing look they always wore in action. "I will come," he said. Whew, that's a tough battle, internal struggle there, like figuring out how to handle that. I think Marcus handled it really well. It's a great comparison between the two scars that they have, right? When they emerged into Uncle Aquila's watchtower, the two older men were standing over the wrought iron brazier that glowed red in its alcove at the far side of the room. They looked round as Marcus and Eska, so like a fireplace, but a iron, like, I don't know, wrought iron, brazier. With, kind of like a old, think of the schools and like Little House on the Prairie, they have the little, sort of like that, the little oven. They looked round as Marcus and Eska entered, but nobody spoke. Only the rain whispered softly, delicately against the narrow windows. The small, lamplit room seemed very remote from the world, very tall above it. Marcus had a sense of immense depths dropping away beneath him in the darkness, as though if he went to the window he might look down and see Orion swimming like a fish below him. Wow, Orion, the constellation of stars. It felt so far up above all humanity that he's like, maybe I'll see constellations below me, like it's in outer space. "Well," said Uncle Aquila at last, and the word fell sharply into the silence, like a pebble dropping into a pool. That's a good metaphor, or simile. Marcus crossed to the writing table and set his bundle down upon it. How pathetic and shapeless it seemed, a bundle that might contain boots or washing, like a little laundry. "It has lost its wings," he said. "That is why it bulks so small." The silken curtain had been drawn back now, and with it was gone the brittle surface of ordinariness that had kept all evening. "So, the rumor was a true one," the Legate said. Marcus nodded and began to undo the shapeless mass. He turned back the last fold, and there, amid the tumble of tattered violet cloth, the lost eagle stood, squat and undignified, but oddly powerful on its splayed legs. The empty wing sockets were very bleak in the lamplight which kindled its gilded feathers to the strong yellow of gorse flowers. There was a furious pride about the upreared head. Wingless it might be, fallen from its old estate, but it was an eagle still, and out of its 12-year captivity it had returned to its own people. For a long moment nobody spoke. And then Uncle Aquila said, "Shall we sit down to this?" Marcus folded up thankfully on one end of the bench, which Eska had drawn to the table, for his unsound leg had begun to shake under him. He was warmly aware of Cub's chin settling contentedly on his foot, and Eska sitting beside him, and as he began to make his report. He made it clearly and carefully, abating nothing of the stories told him, so not shying away from any part of the story. He told it just like it happened, abating nothing of the stories told to him by Gwaran the Hunter and by old Traddywye, though parts of them were hard in the telling. Think of the story that Gwaran the Hunter told about how the 9th Legion had kind of gone downhill because of all the superstition and backbiting, and the one commander who didn't trust people, and vice versa, and just all the just ongoings, difficult, and some of the people did abandon and did have, go against their commander. Not everyone, not the core, but still had a lot of stuff going on, right? So some of that was hard to tell because that was his father's legion. He's proud of his legion, of his father. At the appropriate places, he handed over to Eska to speak for himself, because Eska was the one that went up and, got the eagle from the hiding place and came back down. At the appropriate places, sorry I just read that, and all the time his eyes never left the Legate's intent face. No one moved or spoke at once when the report was finished. Marcus himself sat very still, searching into the long black eyes for their verdict, for his decision. What's he going to say? About Marcus, about the lost legion, about the eagle? The rain sharpened to a little impatient spatter against the window, so the rain increased. Then Claudius Hieronymus shifted, and the spell of stillness was broken. "You have done well, both of you," he said, and his gaze moved from Marcus to Eska and back again, drawing them both in. Thanks to you, a weapon which might have one day been used against the Empire will never be so used. I salute two very courageous lunatics. And they were pretty crazy to go on this, right? They easily could have died. And the Legion. Marcus is wondering, are we going to reform that Legion? Like, that's one of the big things that he wanted from this for his father. No, said the Legate. I am sorry. So Marcus had his verdict. It was thumbs down for the Ninth Legion. He had thought he had accepted that from the night when he heard Gawain's story, right? Now he knew that he had never quite accepted it. In his heart of hearts, he had clung against all reason to the hope that his own judgment was wrong after all. He made one desperate appeal for his father's legion, knowing as he did so that it was hopeless. Sir, there were upward of 3 cohorts who were not, 300 men. No, cohorts, 500 men. There were upward of 1,500 men who were not with the legion when it marched north. Many legions have reformed from fewer survivors than that, if the eagle was still in Roman hands. Those cohorts were broken up 12 years ago and distributed among other legions of the Empire, the legate said very kindly. Excuse me. By now, more than half the men will have finished their military service, and those that have not will have changed their legions to their new eagles long ago. On your own showing, the name and number of the 9th Hispana is no heritage for a new legion to carry. It is better that it be forgotten. Like, by your own story, I mean, all the superstition, all the stuff around it, all the complications, we don't really need to carry that on and continue with the, inside conflict that's going to carry with it. This is a bit of a flashback